Welcome to Transforming Work with Sophie Wade, exploring the future of work. Find out what's going on in our multi-generational distributed organizations. With a new tech and talent focus, discover what you need to know to stay upskilled and relevant and ensure your business keeps its competitive edge.
Hi! This episode is about productivity and capacity at work. How to maximize your brain's capacity and how you and each of your team members can best focus that capacity to improve results, especially when we're dealing with so much economic uncertainty, changing business conditions, AI integrations, and work overload. To discuss productivity, neuroscience, and work capacity, I'm delighted to be speaking with Andrew Mawson, founder and managing director of Advanced Workplace Associates. Andrew is on a quest to help forward-thinking leaders around the world change the world of work. Andrew, how are you?
Oh, well, Sophie, nice to see you again.
Good to see you too. And always starting at the beginning, you studied applied statistics. That's a new one for me. Why did you study that?
Well, I studied applied statistics when I don't think applied statistics was even much of a thing that people did.
Yeah.
And I did it really because it was one of the few subjects I found useful at school and could see any meaning from. And it was a good decision doing it because actually what it's helped to do over the years is describe reality through numbers, which I always thought was the power of it. And certainly as things have moved on today with AI and analytics and all these sorts of things, that basically is what the program was about.
Then you joined Fujitsu and you're focused on future tech and workplace. How did that evolve?
I spent a lot of time in the tech sector, in the defense sector, and then eventually joining ICL, which became Fujitsu when Fujitsu bought ICL. And I was a general manager, really, in the IT industry, logistics, quality management, and so on, and strategic marketing. So I kind of, had a bit of a journey of developing different skills, which was always my intent. But I landed up running a program on what was then called intelligent buildings. That brought me into a whole new world of buildings and stuff, which seemed a bit weird to me. And so I was instrumental in pulling together a program of research involving 7 major companies in Europe.
Okay.
And the research was all about really trying to define what an intelligent building was. And how we would go about integrating the various different solutions from different companies in order to deliver it. And so that was what brought me into the world of work and workplace. And I guess at my heart, I've always had this sort of thing about trying to do things in an efficient way. And when we were looking at the way buildings are occupied and utilization and stuff, it was pretty poor. And just simply because of the fixedness of humans. And so AWA was formed off the back of that piece of research with an intent to help organizations transition to new models of thinking and working and workplace.
So what was the intelligence of the intelligent building that they were looking for? Just to help people work more effectively? Was that the driver?
Well, the commercial driver was to get people to buy more computing technology and networks. We're talking about 35 years ago, so it's moved on. So, but at the time, it was really about trying to, have better data to manage buildings. But the challenge was, of course, that, the technology was expensive. It wasn't well integrated. There weren't any standards that enabled one building system to speak to another one. So every one of these things was a big, expensive integration project.
So I came across your work in, I think, around 2014, 2015, when I was really digging into productivity. And I came across the company Advanced Workplace Associates that you then, out of Fujitsu, established, and your 6 factors of knowledge worker productivity. What was the genesis of starting Advanced Workplace Associates, and then these 6 factors, which I'd love you to go through because it's extremely interesting and insightful.
We formed AWA with 2 other to other experts in different fields. One was an architect, Scottish architect, Wes McGregor, and the other was a guy called Graham Jervis, who was a PhD in chemistry, but had developed his career as in the technology sector in service management. So I was more of the sort of general manager, change management sort of like string of the group. Off the back of this research program, we thought there was an opportunity to provide a different kind of consulting into what was then a very supply-driven market. You know, in those days, you didn't have a lot, as an occupying organisation, you didn't have a lot of choice. There were buildings out there, you either took them or you didn't. And it was very much dominated by the supply side. And the idea was that we would take a very business and people-orientated approach to thinking through the workplace and whatever, but recognising technology as an enabling force. Really. So the 6 factors study actually links back to that time, because one of the early things that we did when I was running the research program inside of Fujitsu, one of the people that we hired to help us try and define what this would be from an architectural standpoint was this chap Wes McGregor, who ultimately joined I and Graham in the business. And the thing was that he was pitching the idea that by doing some of the things he was suggesting, that we would see an improvement in the productivity of the workforce. Okay. I, having run reasonably substantial, groups of business professionals within a department, I couldn't see how these two things linked together. And we spent about 55 minutes having this debate in a meeting, with maybe half a dozen other people. And I realised after a while, he couldn't really answer my question. I wanted to know, well, tell me how this is going to make any difference to the performance and the productivity of people. And he couldn't do it. And so I sort of left that question alone for a while, but it always sort of niggled at me. And it's sort of a holy grail question for people in and around workplace and stuff. So around about 2013, I met a guy called Professor Rob Briner, who's at St Mary's University now. He's a top expert in psychology, professor in psychology. But he's also a member of a group called the Centre for Evidence-Based Management, which is an Amsterdam-based community, global network of academics, high-grade academics that preach and teach and practice, evidence-based management. So we decided we would do some work and try out an approach by looking at all of the research that had been done, or the best quality research that had been done in English around the subject of knowledge worker productivity, because knowledge worker, the idea of the knowledge worker was beginning to come of age around that time. So we commissioned them to go away and look at all the factors that have the biggest influence on the performance of knowledge workers. They came back with 6 factors, and it's probably worth saying definitely the SEBMA approach is quite rigorous. So they look at all of the research that has been done within a certain set of search terms, and then these are from the best academic databases. They take that, they look for relevance to the question you set them, and then they go through a grading process so that they're really looking at the best quality research. I see. And not just looking at one study. I think that's the other important point. It's looking at a number of studies. So what we're trying to do is really understand the subject through the lens of the academic research, but trying to put greater emphasis on the quality research that's being done. So they came back with these 6 factors.
I think that's particularly interesting in terms of what the number one is, going through them in sort of ranked in priority. And because I'm sort of interested to see, think about how they're changing now over time.
Let me give you them in the order of the amount of evidence that there was to support. Number 1 was social cohesion. So social cohesion being, in my mind, sort of business friendship, if you like. When you start looking at social cohesion, it's quite interesting because you realise that people do certain things for people that they are socially cohesive with that they don't do when they're not. So, for instance, people are much more comfortable to share their knowledge to help each other out.
So
And
true.
also much more prepared to challenge each other a bit, and have quite deep, challenging conversations, but without necessarily falling out.
Yeah.
If you have an argument with somebody you don't know very well, it can end in, a
Yes.
sort of a difficult moment. Can't it?
That's a very interesting point. Yes.
So social cohesion is critical, and it's critical in knowledge-based communities because most innovations come as a consequence of people's ideas colliding and fusing and stuff. So, if the name of the game is really to get everybody as socially cohesive as possible, to allow that kind of fluidity of movement of knowledge and collision of knowledge. So that's the first thing. And then the second one was perceived supervisory support.
Okay.
So, it is what it says on the tin, really. But the issue is, of course, that we're all different. And what you might, require in terms of support might be different to me, for instance. So
Right.
what it puts under the looking glass is the skill of the leader to discern, what kind of support different people need at different times.
Yeah.
And maybe also the frequency of that. There are some people who just get on and do stuff. There are other people who need a little bit more nurturing.
The recognition and rewards I saw that was part of that, which was very interesting to me in terms of how they perceive that, the feedback that they're getting for what they're doing.
That's an important element, particularly for more junior staff, I think, to understand how well they're doing and how they're moving in the right direction. So that was the second one. The third one was information sharing. So this is a culture of and the mechanisms by which information is shared. In other words, it's counter to the idea that if I hoard my knowledge, it maintains my power.
Right.
It gives me some power in the organisation. The fourth one was vision and goal clarity. This is slightly different, and we can come back to how all these hang together in a minute. But vision and goal clarity is really about every employee understanding how what they do links to the vision of their team, assuming they have a vision of the team, which of course they should, and then that vision in its own right links to the vision for the organisation. The research suggests that if you haven't got those linkages in place, basically people find it very difficult to commit themselves to the enterprise, go beyond the norm, pile in more discretionary energy, as it's known. So that's the fourth one. The fifth one is really what is called external communication. The Americans call it external outreach. It's about the idea that you should expose your knowledge and your brain to other things and other walks of life and other sources of research that are maybe tangential. So in other words, it's not simply going along to your industry body meetings and meeting people who are a bit like you. It's actually about going to other places and have other people challenge your understanding so that your understandings remain fresh and you don't become sort of arrogant, if you like, from within a very successful organisation. And the final factor, the sixth factor, is trust. And trust underpins all of this, really. In trust in what you're being told by the organisation, trust in your colleagues' desire to do the right thing by you, trust in your leader. So there are different components of this, but at its heart, that's what we're trying to do.
When we're thinking about these 6 factors and where we are now for some of those, where trust is very weak in my conversations, in the data that you see, vision clarity much harder right now because there's so much change going on, whether it's technological, whether it's to do with the workforce, and of course economics. So that's another piece. And then both the social cohesion, but particularly the supervisory. When we have managers who are not yet trained up to be dealing with distributed teams, there's a lot of push and pull about hybrid work or learning how to make that work. What's their capacity to be productive when a number of these factors are really being constrained at the moment?
one of the things that's important is for managers to understand that these 6 factors actually make a difference. Because I think once you begin to understand that, you can then begin to manage to them. And I agree with you. I mean, I think it's a difficult time for people, and one of the reasons why it's difficult because there is a lack of vision, there is a lack of certainty. But I think we have to hold, I think the duty of a leader is to try to create a level of certainty and create a vision and create a direction of travel that is almost independent of the turmoil that's going on. Because I think by doing that, you actually reduce people's anxiety and reduce their load. One of the difficulties, though, for a leader at this time is to be able to do that and to be able to say things and do things which are going to remain true going forward.
Right.
And because I think if you're not able to constantly tell the truth about the situation or make promises that you can live up to, then I'm afraid that's where trust begins to become damaged.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky tightrope to walk for a leader, is what I would say. But I think that regardless of the conditions, I think you have to work at these various different things in different ways. I mean, for certain, I think there's a real need to try to create social cohesion within a team and across teams.
Yeah.
And I think to some degree that also is an antidote to some of the things you talked about. If I'm comfortable and happy and respected by my community, and I've got friends to talk to openly and honestly, then I think that makes quite a lot of difference in these awkward times as well.
That work then evolved into a lot more focused work, which you've been sort of evolving from then on. I'd love you to go into more detail about that.
This study was really quite eye-opening, and it was also very good to know that it was possible to go through this process and end up with something that seemed to make sense in the real world once you pieced all the bits together.
Right.
And so we started then to say, well, okay, we now understand what the 6 factors of knowledge work are, but they work at a team and community level.
Sure. Okay.
But what about, individuals within a team are basically, humans. Obviously, there are people in teams. Well, all those people have got brains. Those are the things that are going to be the sort of unit of production going forward in the world of knowledge work. So what do we know about the factors that have the biggest influence on the performance of the brain? And so we went through exactly the same process again with the Centre for Evidence-Based Management. And they came back with around about 14 factors that in one form or another have an influence on the performance of the brain. Some of those things are about the environment in which people operate, but a lot of them are about how people live their lives and the things they need to do on a daily basis to keep themselves in good order. So that added an extra layer of richness to our understanding. So we now know, what works to keep people on their A game. We now know what we need to do to get teams working well. So, there's 2 bits of the jigsaw that we've kind of we've got in place.
What are the top factors for keeping my brain in top form?
Sure. Well, number 1 is sleep.
Okay.
So 7.5 hours good quality sleep is
easier said than done.
Well, it is, and it is easy to say, and it's easy for people to nod and say yes, that's fine. But doing it is a little bit more difficult. To get a good night's sleep, really, you need to make sure you prepare properly.
Okay.
Certainly, things like alcohol have an impact upon the quality of your sleep. The number of times you're woken during the night, whether you've taken caffeine in the early evening. The other thing that often has an impact upon people's sleep is the amount of time they spend on their phone or their screens, because that also, awakens your brain. So there's a bunch of things that you need to know, but putting them into operation in a busy life, perhaps with a family and other challenges is a different story. Number 2 is hydration.
Oh, okay. That's quite a lot.
So you really should be taking in up to around about 2 litres of water a day. And it's actually quite difficult to do that. So the other one is exercise, and then diet. So particularly breakfast. Breakfast was one of the things that came out of the study. But we did a subsequent study looking at with a nutritionist, which looked at the same subject but beyond that. So the Mediterranean diet came out as being something that also seems to have a linkage to cognitive performance. If you do all of those things, then the research would suggest that you should be in a pretty good situation when you start work every day. You should be in good order. And just pick up one or two of the things you said before. In a difficult world, when things are going a bit wrong for you, it's very easy to slip into bad habits around this. But this is exactly the time you need to be making sure that you are, you're in the best state. And there's a little exercise that I do when I'm speaking about this subject. And very often what I'll do is get everybody to stand up and say to them, right, if you had 8 hours good quality sleep last night, 7.5 hours sleep, stay standing. So half the population sits down.
Right.
And then I go through the same thing with hydration and nutrition and so on. And almost universally, I end up with about 5 in 100 people.
Oh, wow.
Still standing up. If you're running a business with 10,000, 20,000 people, that's 10,000, 20,000 brains. So you want those brains to be in good shape, really. And so it seems to me that's an area that we can look at, and it's good for productivity, but it's very good for well-being as well.
I think about not just 10,000 people, but if you have 100 people, that 10,000, you have a much more diversified portfolio of brains, I guess. 100 people, you need many more of those to be able to move your business forward. So what does that mean for managers? Because those 4 top things that you talked about are all really personal elements of, say, my team's lifestyle and how they're running their lives. I can't, as their manager, necessarily. I can encourage them or make some suggestions, but there's not much I can do. They really need to be convinced of this. If they don't have the brain power available, that's obviously going to, if they have a constrained capacity, that's going to make all of our work harder. And I also, as a manager, now am sort of tasked with thinking about their mental health and again, this more complete picture of well-being. That's a lot for me to be dealing with. What suggestions do you offer?
We're in the process of actually trialing something with a cohort of leaders. From January, we're taking 20 leaders in a technology company, and we're going to apply all of this research to this cohort and their teams. Right? So the idea is that we start off, we do a lot of baselining, we understand their personal lifestyles, we understand their cognitive performance, we may look at some of their sort of physiological traits and so on. And then what we go through is a process of education.
Okay.
So we're teaching them not only what makes a difference, but why it makes a difference and what parts of the brain. We sort of look at neurotransmitters and various other, ways the brain works, kind of thing.
Right.
And then after we've done that, we have a coaching session with each one of them on a one-to-one basis. Because to your point, everybody knowing that these things make a difference isn't really good enough, because we want people to integrate these things into their lives, and there are plenty of things in our lives that stop us from doing these things. So it's a question of building up new habits and setting up the conditions under which that will happen. So we have that. So that's the first thing, and then we will then measure several months later, and and on the way through, their cognitive performance, and also we may do some 360 type stuff, so that we are able to look at the individual's performance through the lens of a number of different people. But at the end of that period, what we'll be trying to do is to look at their performance, their perceptions of it, and we'll also be wanting to try and look at the linkage with business outcomes.
Okay.
So that's the first phase. The second phase is to apply the 6 factors research that we were talking about before,
Right.
and also some stuff around managing mental workload, which is another study that we've done, because I think that actually is getting people to recognise that humans have got a finite capacity, and how that capacity is loaded and eaten into is also another important part of the jigsaw.
Absolutely, yes.
And then the third leg is to put these people into an environment that is designed very deliberately to limit, reduce, eradicate the cognitive load on them through the physical workplace. And that's made more difficult because, of course, we're all different. And,
Right. Yes, we certainly are.
Lots of talk about neurodiversity and so on, but that talk ends up mostly being about the extreme areas of
Very true.
Neurodiversity, whereas I think our approach is to say, look, we are all actually different. We all have sensitivities to noise that are different. We have sensitivity to temperature that are different, and so on. So we should be trying to create an environment and giving people knowledge about the status of different spaces and things in the places in the building, so they can go and choose. Every time your body or your brain is trying to cool you down because you're too hot, it's expending energy on things that it shouldn't be spending energy.
Wow.
So it's adding to the already heavy cognitive load that you're already bearing. So the idea is to measure all the way through this. And
fascinating.
We'll learn a load of stuff, but my goal is really for us to get to a point where hopefully we can demonstrate that by applying this kind of approach, that there are some significant improvements in wellness, but also in terms of business outcomes, because I think this is what will get business leaders interested in the subject. Whereas I think at the moment it's a bit of a nice to have happiness thing, and it needs to become more than that.
Yes, definitely. Particularly when so many people are struggling with, the burnout, overload, feels like there's too much change all the time, and that's not going to stop anytime soon, as you and I know very well, and therefore this isn't going to get better. So being able to manage one's capacity for being productive and taking better care of one's brain, I think is a great way to get there. I can't wait for the end of next year when you get some of the results and can publish them. When it comes to this mental load, I'd love to hear some of that detail as well, because of where we are right now.
When you get into it, a lot of the research is extremely obvious, but it isn't obvious. It's like a lot of these things. It's obvious when you know it, but you don't when you don't know it. One way to describe some of the things that come through in the research is through a little example, which I quite like to do sometimes. So if I say to you, right, we're going to make a cup of tea, right?
Okay.
And I happen to be very good at making tea because I'm from the north of England, and that's that's what we do, right?
Okay.
But let's just say, for the fun of it, because you've spent a little bit of time in America, that you got so obsessed by coffee you didn't really spend much time learning how to make tea very well.
Okay.
So if somebody says to me, "Can you make a cup of tea?" I don't even have to think about it. It's kind of, I've done it thousands of times. I know exactly where to do it. I almost do it with my eyes shut.
Right.
But for you are not an expert at making tea, so this has a much higher load. So it's the same task, but it has a higher load on your brain. Okay.
And particularly if I'm making it for you, because I know that you really understand tea, and therefore I'm likely not to get it right.
Well, you might be a bit anxious about it.
Yeah.
It also depends on the nature. I mean, if I was the Prime Minister or the King or something, that would add another piece of cognitive load on you. So you can begin to see how, and so I think one of the interesting things is that when you start getting into this, you start realizing that your brain is not what you think it is. Most people imagine their brains are the bit that they think with, that they see with, they hear with. It's their conscious It's what they're consciously aware of. But in fact, your brain is doing lots of other things. Right now it's managing the movement that I make in my arms. It's managing my cardiovascular system. It's managing my digestive system. If I've had any, it's managing the inflammation in my body.
Yep.
It's cooling me down. It's heating me up. It's doing loads of things. And of course, this is placing a cognitive load on your brain as well. Now, there are other things that add cognitive load. I mean, we can't segment our brains in terms of work versus home, for instance. So if we have worries about money, or we've got worries about relatives that are in need of care, or children, or this or that, then these are all adding to this load that we carry around with us. And that's before we start thinking about the tasks that are given to us and that we create for ourselves on a daily basis. So you think about it, you get tasks from the HR department, you get tasks from the finance function, you get tasks from your peers, you get tasks from your colleagues, your subordinates, your boss. So, but all these different things are creating load on your brain. And so, but there doesn't appear to be much of a recognition that there's a limitation. There's an amount that we can cope with. And so I think one of the most important things for leaders to do is to recognize, first of all, that this is what's going on. And when we load people, we don't simply, you can add a day's work to somebody by sending them a very short email these days.
Right.
And you're doing that lands with that individual who may well have a number of other things going on, who's got a list of things as long as your arm, who's already worried and anxious about how on earth they're going to get through all this stuff. And then this additional load comes on. And so I think and this is where people start to really perform badly and ultimately become mentally ill. And, I've seen this many times with some of our associates. They've got several projects they're working on and they've got a lot of stuff going on. You can see it. And you say to them, are you okay with this? Because, I can see that you've got a lot of challenging things going on. And they'll say, yes, I'm fine, I'm fine. And then one day something will arrive and it'll just push them to the point where I can't cope with this. And what you find at that point is they seem to have lost the ability to plan and think logically. And so quite often what I've done is just to say, right, we're going to make a list of all the things that you've got. We're going to work out which ones are the most important. We're going to work out who can do some of those, and we're going to release you for some of these things. And as you go through that process, you can see them visibly just chilling out and going, "Oh, thank goodness for that," And it's quite palpable. You see, and then they're able to get back in business again,
right?
And it's a sort of a learning process both for the manager but for the individual as well, because the individual needs to be able to manage the load,
right?
And know what's going on with them at different stages in this process. So that's really. So when you add that dimension to the other two studies that we were involved in, you start, and then just to take that a little bit further, we've spent a lot of time looking at the neuroscience and understanding more of the brain. We've been talking to neuroscientists in North America. We've even brought a new neuroscientist into our own team, which is pretty unusual for a consultancy of our kind. But this, what you begin to realize is that organizations really are communities of connected brains.
Okay,
and
that's a very interesting way to put it.
Well, they are. The name of the game is to maximize the knowledge flow from those brains, to maximize the energy in those brains, and to point all of that knowledge and energy at things that make a societal and commercial difference, which is where you start seeing the links back, because Of course, we talked about vision and goal clarity when I was talking about the 6 factors.
Right.
Well, vision and goal clarity is all about pointing all of that energy and that knowledge at things that are going to make a difference.
Yep.
You know, social cohesion is about creating the conditions under which knowledge flows and innovation happens. All of the factors around, you know, improving the performance of the brain are all about giving you better capacity and managing your wellness. You know, so all these things, they all sort of link together, and
Very much so.
you know, increasingly we're working with clients to apply all this body of knowledge to, you know, problems of engagement and well-being, you know, as well as trying to assist in helping improve productivity in knowledge-based communities.
Very interesting from a neuroscience basis, and logical, but very practical in terms of just thinking how we can be better managing our brain capacity, our work, and really reducing the challenges that we're facing, you know, on an environmental level, and then very practically when we get down to actually thinking about our work so that we have as much capacity as possible to deal with it. So what would be the core things that you would advise managers who are, you know, dealing with challenging situations? What are the key things to focus on right now without having gone through all your research and with all the different factors?
I think the first thing the leaders need to do is understand more about the brain. I mean, I you know, I have to say, you know, we mentioned earlier on, I worked in a pretty big company in my early years. And I have to say, you know, looking back, you know, I was, you know, quite a senior leader at quite a young age, but I was in relation to what we've just talked about, I was a caveman. and I think a lot of leaders just don't have the picture, you know, and I think we're particularly bad, even if you take conventional management education. As a country, we're pretty poor at it. Now, I think it was something like 44% was the number that Gallup came up with in terms of the number of leaders that had any management training at all.
Management training and capability, the number is very low from Gallup. I think it's 10% generally who have naturally good management capability. So without the training, I don't think the number's much higher in the US either.
There's individual skill, right? And then there's a platform of knowledge. And in most organizations, there is not one practice of how you go about managing a team. And I understand that makes some sense, but I think there are some principles. Yeah. And I think the 6 factors are actually a very good set of principles to use as a beacon, if you want. Sure. To, you know, a playbook, if you like, to run your organization. Right. Yeah. And I think what's interesting is because when I read it, of course, you talk about something like social cohesion. Well, social cohesion, you know, turns out to be a really, really important thing. But how many managers see their responsibility as being to create social cohesion? Not very many. I mean, if it happens, and you happen to have a good bunch of people who get on well together and go to the pub and stuff, it just happens. But if you haven't got that, it doesn't seem to be anybody's job to create it. If
you have a strong culture, that will feed into it and help create more of that social cohesion with the team. But the manager still does need to reinforce that with that particular group of people. Yeah.
The other thing that we do in organizations, and I've heard leaders talk about it, you know, with great joy, is that we've got competition between teams. Right. And we create competition between teams. What do? We create division. You know, we break social cohesion. So, you know, I think there are some things that we do, and the way we go about allocating resources through financial processes. You know, this team has got this much money to do these things. This team has got, but quite often teams have to work together in order to be able to make things happen. So, as a leader of reasonable size organisation, seems to me you've got to work pretty hard to create the conditions under which you overcome all of these barriers. And I think you do that. As a leadership team, you have to model that kind of behavior. You have to demonstrate that you are actually modeling that within your own team.
Right.
And then you should expect that of your own teams and create moments for when people come together. But encourage, social cohesion is something I think has to be worked at, particularly in challenging times. One of the great things during difficult times is knowing you've got good colleagues you can talk to, and you can.
So true.
So those are the things we talk about a lot. Is just having people recognize those factors and focus their energies on them.
That's a perfect note to end on, Andrew. Thank you. And very much about social cohesion, whether you're at work in person, whether you're hybrid, going in, having some cadence of in and out of the office, it really makes a difference how well people connect and having a leader who is really trying to stimulate those relationships, particularly trusting relationships. So perfect note to end on. Thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing
Pleasure.
what you have.
Thank you.
I'm very much looking forward to this new pilot this new project is going to be rolling out over the course of next year. And this time next year, I hope we can talk again about the results and what has been found. And I'm very confident it will be showing what you and I hope it does. So really, really appreciate your time and your insights. Thanks, Andrew.
It's a pleasure, great pleasure. Love to come back and share the insights as and when.
Thanks again so much to Andrew Mawson, founder and managing director of Advanced Workplace Associates. You can find out more about Andrew on LinkedIn, as well as go to the website advanced-workplace.com. How is your team managing their time, attention, and capacity for high performance? My new course, Empower High-Performing Teams, enables leaders to deepen their connections, improve collaboration, and improve results. Check out modernworklife.co to find out more. If you enjoyed this episode, please like it and share it with a friend. You can also write a quick review wherever you watch or listen. For more curated, useful research, articles, and information, follow me on LinkedIn, as well as go and sign up for my newsletter at flexos.work/work-in-progress. Thanks for watching. See you next time.